Telling about the growing tensions in the Democratic Republic of Congo amid opposition calls for demonstrations against the country's disputed general election results. European and Canadian embassies are now calling for restraint as those results continue to trickle in. President Felix Tshisekedi is still in the lead for votes counted so far. Let's speak now to human rights activist Kambale Musavuli, who's joining us from Washington, D.C. A very good evening to you, sir. Good to have your time. Let me get your reaction first to Tshisekedi currently being in the lead despite all the criticism that he had faced going into the election.
Before we discuss the lead, we have to discuss the process. When we are talking about 1/3 of the polling stations open, is problematic. 45% of the polls open very late. Some open even at 3 p.m. As of today, we are Sunday. People in Kasongo-Lunda are going to vote on Monday, right? The elections took place on December 20th. I think that we should be honest about the process. This was not an election, and Congo has had electoral processes before now, and it's really quite sad to see $1.2 billion spent in a way where voters are feeling disenfranchised, and actually, of course, the result being shared now being not credible.
A result that's not credible, multiple delays. Many of those complaints emerged soon after, well, hours in fact, after polling stations were meant to open in the DRC. Is what is now being labeled as an election that was not credible, was it engineered to be in that way, or was it simply a failure of the Electoral Commission to get its ducks in a row?
It's hard to tell. From our perspective at the Center for Research on the Congo, we would say that it was engineered to be this way. In terms of issues around the electoral process, from the beginning of this year to now, different institutions, including the presidential candidate, have shared the concern with the process. Let's start with some basic ones. We were asked this year for every single electors to re-register to vote. Not to update the voter roll, but actually for every single person to re-register to vote. When people did so, they received a voter registration card. What's the issue with a voter registration card? The issue with the voter registration card is that after a month of you having received a voter registration card, your face disappeared from the card and even your name. This was an issue brought to the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commissioner, Denis Kadima, that should not be something to worry about. During the day of the election, you can come to the poll and vote. What did we see unfold on December 20th? People went to vote and found out that someone already voted for them. How so? Because a person could come to the polls and just use anyone's data to provide it to the polling officials and so on. And I can go on and on about the different issues about presenting, for example, the whole electoral roll so that we know who is actually voting per the Constitution and so on. But so far, with every indication already, we are seeing that no matter what the result that's presented, people will not trust in that process. They will feel that they're being disenfranchised. And of course, the opposition right now, specifically, about 10 presidential candidates so far have called for a rerun of the election. That's something to see.
And some of the candidates wanted annulled. Moise Katumbi, for instance, is saying that the elections should be annulled based on allegations of fraud. Who will it rest upon now to resolve the many questions about the credibility of this poll? Will it be the Electoral Commission, or will the courts in the DRC ultimately have to step in, do you think?
Before even Moise Katumbi, we had 5 presidential candidates that did so, Martin Fayulu, Denis Mukwege, and others who did that. So it's a unison call. All presidential, not all, those who have presented themselves already with their opinion on it, share the same concern. Who will do it? It's really up to the states. We are going election to election with electoral issues. The 2006 election had electoral issues. 2011, many protests inside and outside of the Congo. There were also concerns around the electoral process. In 2016, there was supposed to be an election that was extended all the way to 2018. The end of that process also had electoral issues. We are now in 2023. We are making the same mistakes. But our contemporary history is sharing with us that when there are electoral contests, as we see now, we can have destabilization. We've seen that in Mali, we've seen that in Niger, we've seen that in Burkina Faso, and now lately even in Gabon. When we listen to
how great a risk do you think there is for that sort of thing? Because in 2018, when Felix Tshisekedi was elected, there were protests against that outcome. More than 30 people died, yet he governed nonetheless.
Yeah. He governed an illegitimate government. This is why he's had a very hard time leading the country. The country is split, right? But now, in terms of what's going to unfold, no one knows what is going to unfold. We are all still watching the process. We still have up until New Year's Eve to see if the Electoral Commission will come to its senses and call for a new election of whichever state institution will do that. But the challenge that we face is this. The Congolese people on December 20th showed that they are still believing in the democratic institution and democratic process. Millions left their homes to go to the polling stations to vote. Continuing to do so makes the people actually check out the democratic process. When they do so, it leaves room for opportunists and other entities to actually fill the vacuum. We see that already. We are discussing election today. As of yesterday, Saturday, we see that the M23 rebels backed by Rwanda have taken over 2 cities already in the east. Before that, a week before the elections, we saw the former electoral commissioner, Corneille Nangaa, in a press conference with leaders of the M23, starting a new alliance. They're calling it Alliance Congo River, Alliance Fleuve Congo, calling for the Congolese people to use Article 64 of our Constitution to take the matters into their own hand to transform the countries. So that's the danger. The danger is that people have tested for decades the democratic process, and in the end of that process, their voice is still not heard. It leaves room for other solutions to transform the Congo, which may not be appropriate or also bring about meaningful change in the Congo. This is why it's critical.
Who then would stand the better chance of benefiting from a potential political crisis in the DRC?
There are many people who stand to benefit, including the regime of the DRC. I mean, think about the regime of Tshisekedi. They instituted what they call the most martial law in the province of North Kivu to bring about peace and stability, which they have not been able to. And that region did not have people to vote. You know how many electors are in that region that did not vote? 1.7 million Congolese eligible to vote did not vote in Masisi and Rutshuru, right? So he stands to benefit because he knew that in the East, probably he would not have won the vote. So the instability does benefit him. The instability also benefits Congo's neighbors, who uses the instability to loot the resources in DRC. This is how we've had in past years SADC nations, particularly South Africa, send their troops to support the Congolese to bring an end to the conflict. So there are many people at stake, but those who will not benefit from it are the Congolese, the 6 million Congolese who have died in this conflict, the 100 million Congolese who want to see a new Congo, the 100 million Congolese who hope, just as they voted for Patrice Lumumba in 1960, that today in 2023, they can freely elect a leader without any political or external interference.
I wonder, Mr. Musavuli, if Congolese at home and Congolese abroad, as you're speaking to us from Washington tonight, view the incumbent in the same way, President Tshisekedi. Do they all see him the same way, given that even as those early results began to come in from people who'd cast their ballots abroad, Tshisekedi had already taken a lead even from that counting?
We are talking about 5,000, 3,000 votes in the diaspora. Right? For the first time, the Electoral Commission of the government of the Congo decided that the diaspora will vote. They selected 5 countries. Right? In these 5 countries combined, 5,300 votes participated in the process. And in these 5,000 people who participated in the election, they're telling us about 80% of them voted for Tshisekedi. We already know that this does not make any sense. As of yesterday, Congolese in Paris are also protesting these results, right? Saying that it does not make sense that in the vote result presented, they show that there were 2 polling stations in France when there was only 1 at the embassy. So we can argue and share the evidence of that. 5,300 people voting in the diaspora do not represent the millions of Congolese. Even in South Africa, if I just come to Johannesburg, we have more than 5,000 Congolese living in South Africa who could vote. So we know that's not a representation of the sentiment of the people. It's also a statistical fallacy to actually use that as a way to show the support of the current president. This is why I shared in the beginning. The electoral process did not start on December 20th. Mm-hmm. The electoral process did not start with the result that's being published now. Mm-hmm. It started for over a year, and through that process, there have been many irregularities that institutions inside of the country and outside have already called foul on how it's being organized. We are now just at the end of the process where we are realizing that $1.2 billion has been spent to organize an election, and people are still voting 5 days after the election. Of course, people will question the result. But there are people who do support Tshisekedi. That is true. But what we have to say is, as I said in the beginning, what does this election represent? The electoral process, what the Congolese people want is they want peace and stability. They have not received that, and the current regime has not provided that.
Kambale Musavuli, good to speak to you from Washington, D.C. about the electoral process in the DRC. Thank you.